The first sound isn't the knock. It's the silence outside your window. The kind where the usual crickets or distant highway hum just vanish. Then the headlights sweep across your living room ceiling like a searchlight, red and blue strobing through the blinds before your brain even registers what you're seeing. You're sitting on the couch in sweatpants, maybe scrolling your phone, maybe already half asleep. 3 heavy raps on the front door. Not the casual knock of a neighbor. That deliberate, flat-palmed, "we're not leaving" knock. A voice, muffled through the wood, but unmistakably official. "Police department, open the door." Your heart just slammed into your ribs, didn't it? You feel it, that cold wash of adrenaline. The split-second calculus of what did I do, even when you know you didn't do anything. Through the side window, you see 2 silhouettes, maybe 3. One stands slightly back, hands near their belt. The other has a flashlight aimed at the ground, but you catch the glint of a body camera. They haven't announced a warrant. They haven't shouted emergency. Just that flat, expectant command. And now they're waiting. Another knock, harder this time. "We know you're in there." Here's the question I want you to sit with before we go any further. Has this ever happened to you? Police at your home, unannounced, late at night, or in the middle of a Saturday afternoon, asking to talk for a minute, or just see if anyone else is here, or asking if they can step inside real quick. Maybe they were friendly at first. Maybe they pressured you. Maybe you let them in without even thinking. I want you to comment your experience below. What you said, what they said, how it ended. Because I promise you, someone reading this right now made a 3-second mistake at their own front door that turned into a 6-month legal nightmare. And I'm going to show you exactly where that mistake happened, and more importantly, how to never make it. But first, let's rewind to that moment at your door. Before you take a single step toward the knob, you need to understand something that almost no civilian fully grasps until it's too late. The police officers standing outside are already running a high-stakes psychological play, and your front door is the only thing giving you leverage. The second you open it, that leverage shifts. Not because they're bad people. Many of them genuinely believe they're about to solve a problem. But because their training, their incentives, and the law all align to reward one thing: getting you to voluntarily give up your rights without a fight. Let me say that again. Voluntary consent is the holy grail of street-level policing. If an officer asks to come in and you say sure, they just bypass the Fourth Amendment entirely. No warrant needed. No probable cause required. No judge signing anything. Your own words just handed them the keys to your castle. And here's the part that keeps me up at night. Most people open the door and start talking before their brain even catches up. They're nervous, they want to be polite, they don't want to seem guilty, so they swing the door wide and immediately start answering questions. "Yeah, I live here. Yeah, I was just watching TV. No, no one else is here. Wait, come in? Okay, I guess." Stop. Right there. That "okay, I guess" just became evidence. And you don't even know what they're investigating. I've watched body camera footage that would make your stomach turn. Ordinary people, innocent people, standing in their own living rooms while officers walk room to room, opening closets, peeking under beds, all because the homeowner said, "I have nothing to hide," and let them in. And here's the cruel irony. The person who says, "I have nothing to hide," is often the person who gets charged with something they didn't even know was illegal. A roommate's forgotten vape pen, a pill bottle that rolled under the couch, a firearm your spouse left on the kitchen counter that technically violates a local ordinance you've never heard of. Innocent people generate evidence against themselves every single day, not because they committed a crime, but because they volunteered for a search they didn't have to submit to. So let's get one thing absolutely clear right now, because this is the most important sentence in this entire article. You do not have to open your door just because police knock. Read that again. There is no law in the United States that requires you to answer your door for law enforcement, unless they have a warrant signed by a judge or there's a true emergency. And I mean a real emergency, like they can see smoke pouring out your window or hear someone screaming for help. Not "we received a call about a disturbance." Not "we just want to ask a few questions." Not "we're doing a neighborhood check." Those are tactics, not legal commands. The Supreme Court has been remarkably consistent on this. Your home is entitled to the highest level of Fourth Amendment protection. Inside those 4 walls, your privacy interest is at its absolute peak. Police cannot enter without a warrant, absent exigent circumstances. That's the legal term for an urgent emergency. And they cannot stand at your door and demand entry just because they feel like it. The knock itself is not an order. It's a request for you to participate in your own loss of liberty. Now, here's where the psychology gets brutal. Most people feel an overwhelming social pressure to open the door. We're raised to answer when someone knocks. We're taught to respect authority. We're afraid that if we ignore them, they'll break the door down or come back with a SWAT team. I've heard every fear in the book. What if they think I'm hiding something? What if they arrest me for obstruction? What if they just force their way in anyway? Let me put those fears to rest, because this is where knowing the law turns fear into power. Refusing to open your door, or opening it but refusing consent to enter, is not obstruction. It is not probable cause. It is not suspicious behavior that justifies a warrantless entry. It is the exercise of a constitutional right. And any officer who tells you otherwise is either poorly trained or deliberately lying to manipulate you. I've watched officers say, if you don't let us in, we'll just get a warrant and it'll be worse for you. That's a classic pressure play. And most of the time, they don't have a warrant, they can't get a warrant, and they're hoping you don't know that. But here's where it gets even more interesting, and where the title of this article, How to Fool Police AI Cameras, comes into play. Because law enforcement agencies across the country have quietly deployed a new generation of surveillance technology that changes the game entirely. We're not talking about body cams anymore, although those matter. We're talking about automated license plate readers mounted on patrol cars that log every vehicle in your driveway. We're talking about neighborhood pole cameras with facial recognition that can track who comes and goes from your front door. We're talking about AI-driven software that analyzes body language, voice stress, and even micro-expressions during door interactions, feeding those assessments back to officers in real time through earpieces. And yes, we're talking about the growing use of predictive algorithms that flag your address as a person of interest location, based entirely on metadata, social media check-ins, or a single call from a neighbor who doesn't like your dog. You want to know how to fool those systems? You don't need a tinfoil hat or a signal jammer. You need two things: silence and a closed door. Because those AI cameras are trained to analyze behavior. They look for nervous movement, excessive talking, fidgeting, repeated denials, opening the door too wide, stepping outside onto the porch, offering explanations unsolicited. Every single one of those behaviors gets fed into a risk assessment score that the officer sees on a screen. The higher your score, the more pressure they apply. It's a feedback loop of suspicion. You act nervous because cops are at your door. The AI flags nervousness as suspicious. The officer reads that and escalates. You get more nervous. The AI scores you higher. And before you know it, what started as a casual knock has turned into a consensual search of your bedroom closet. So how do you break the loop? You become invisible to the algorithm. You give it nothing to analyze. You don't talk. You don't open the door wide. You don't step outside. You don't offer explanations. You don't ask, "What's this about?" in a shaky voice. You speak slowly, calmly, and you say only the words that have been tested and proven in courtrooms for decades. Let me give you the exact script, because I know your mind is racing right now, thinking about what you would actually say. You approach the door. You do not unlock it. You speak through the door or through a slightly cracked window. The officer will identify themselves. They'll say something like, "We're responding to a call about a possible disturbance at this address." Or, "We're looking for a suspect who might have run through your backyard." Or, "We just want to ask you a few questions about something that happened down the street." Your response, word for word, "I do not consent to any search. Please leave my property unless you have a warrant." That's it. No sorry, no I'm not trying to be difficult, no let me see the warrant. Just that calm, flat statement. And then you stop talking. You don't explain why. You don't argue. You don't say, "I'm innocent, so I have nothing to hide, but I'm just exercising my rights." Every extra word you speak is data for the AI and ammunition for the officer. I can already hear someone thinking, "But that sounds rude. That sounds guilty. I don't want to make them angry." I understand that impulse. It's human. But here's what I've learned from analyzing hundreds of police-civilian interactions. Politeness is not a legal defense, and the officer's feelings are not your priority in that moment. Your priority is protecting the constitutional line between the public sidewalk and your private home. Once you let them cross that line, even 1 foot inside your doorway, the legal standard shifts. They can now legally observe anything in plain view from that position. They can claim they smelled marijuana or heard something suspicious. They can escalate based on what they see on your coffee table or your kitchen counter. Things that were invisible from the porch become probable cause the second you invite them in. And here's the part that most people never consider until it's too late. Police are trained to ask questions even when they already have the answer. They'll ask anyone else in the house, even if they saw movement through the window. They'll ask, do you have any weapons in here? Not because they're afraid, but because your answer, whether you say yes, no, or hesitate, gives them information and potential consent to look. They'll ask, can I come in and talk for a second? Knowing that if you say yes, they now have legal standing to walk through your living room, glance into your bedrooms, and note the location of every person, object, and exit. The scariest scenarios aren't the aggressive officers. They're the friendly ones. The ones who smile, make small talk, mention they have kids your age, ask about your job, because your brain automatically lowers its guard. You start treating them like a guest instead of an adversary, and that's exactly what they want. Not because they're evil, again, many of them genuinely see themselves as problem solvers, but because their job is to gather information. And the easiest way to gather information is to make you forget that everything you say and do inside your own home is now being recorded on a body camera, analyzed by software, and potentially read aloud in a courtroom. Let me give you a real example that still makes me angry when I think about it. A woman I'll call Sarah, not her real name, heard knocking at 11 p.m. 2 officers said they were checking on a report of a domestic dispute at her address. She lived alone, no dispute, but she was scared, so she opened the door. They asked if they could come in just to make sure everything was okay. She said sure, because she thought being cooperative would make them leave faster. They walked through her small apartment, asked a few questions about her ex-boyfriend who didn't live there, and then one officer noticed a folded piece of paper on her kitchen table with a list of names and numbers. It was a work schedule, but the officer asked to see it. She handed it over. That consent to see the paper led to questions about the names on the list, which led to a call to her employer at midnight, which led to her being fired 2 days later for inappropriate communication with law enforcement, even though she had done nothing wrong. She was never charged with a crime. She was never suspected of a crime. She just lost her job because she opened her door and said, sure. Now imagine if she had spoken through the door. I don't consent to any search. Do you have a warrant? They would have said no, because there was no warrant. They would have left. Her job would be intact. Her privacy would be intact. Her night would have been annoying, but legally uneventful. The AI cameras I mentioned earlier make this even more dangerous. Some departments now use automated voice stress analysis on door interactions. The software listens for pitch changes, speaking rate, and specific verbal tics like like, or you know. If your voice shows stress, the system flags you as deceptive or anxious, and the officer receives that alert on their phone or in-car terminal. They then ask more questions based on that alert, creating a self-fulfilling prophecy of suspicion. The only way to beat that software is to give it nothing to analyze. Short, neutral statements. No emotion, no nervous laughter, no over-explaining, just the same 2 sentences repeated calmly. I do not consent to any search. Please leave unless you have a warrant. Here's another tactic I want you to watch for. Officers will sometimes ask, can you step outside so we can talk? This is a trap. The moment you step onto your porch, you've left the interior of your home. The heightened 4th Amendment protection for the inside of your house does not apply to your front porch or your driveway. On your porch, you are in a public or semi-public space. They can detain you there. They can pat you down if they have reasonable suspicion. They can ask for ID without a reason. And once you're outside, they can look back through your open door into your home and claim plain view of anything visible from that angle. Never step outside to talk. If you open the door at all, you keep your body inside the threshold and you do not exit. What if they say they smell something? This is a common tactic. An officer at your door says, "I smell marijuana," or "I smell chemicals," or "I smell something burning." That olfactory statement creates probable cause for a warrantless entry under the exigent circumstances exception. The idea that evidence might be destroyed if they wait for a warrant. Here's the reality. Officers have successfully used this tactic even when no smell existed. The body camera doesn't record smells. It's their word against yours. So what do? You do not open the door. You say, "I do not consent to any search." If you are entering without a warrant based on a smell, please state that clearly on your body camera. And then you step back from the door. You do not physically resist. You do not block the door. If they force entry, they force entry. That's on them, but you do not invite it. I want to pause here and acknowledge something that might make some of you uncomfortable. I am not saying all police encounters are traps. I am not saying officers are your enemies. I have family members in law enforcement. I have watched officers run into burning buildings and pull people out of car wrecks. Police work is dangerous, underpaid, and often thankless. But the structure of American criminal procedure gives officers enormous incentives to obtain consent rather than warrants. And the difference between a consensual encounter and a constitutional violation often comes down to a single sentence spoken at your front door. That sentence is your responsibility to protect. No one else will say it for you. Let me share one more scenario, because this is the one that breaks my heart every time. A father hears knocking. His teenage son is in the back room. Officers say they're investigating a possible theft and want to ask the son a few questions. The father, wanting to be helpful, says, "Come in, I'll go get him." While the father walks to the back, the officers stand in the living room. They see a backpack on the couch. They notice a corner of something sticking out. They ask the father if they can look inside the backpack. The father, now flustered and trying to be cooperative, says, "Sure, go ahead." Inside the backpack is a small amount of marijuana. The son is charged. The father is charged with maintaining a drug premises because it's his house. Neither had any intention of breaking the law. Neither had any warning. Both lost because the father said "sure" instead of "I do not consent to any search. Do you have a warrant?" That father is not a bad person. He's not stupid. He's not reckless. He's a normal human who panicked and defaulted to cooperation because that's what we're all raised to do. And that default cooperation is exactly what the system is designed to exploit. So here's your takeaway, and I want you to remember this like your freedom depends on it, because sometimes it does. The police AI cameras are watching for hesitation, for rambling, for nervous gestures, for stepping outside, for opening the door too wide, for offering unsolicited explanations. They are analyzing your voice pitch and your word choices. They are feeding real-time risk assessments to the officer at your door. The only way to fool that system is to become a constitutional ghost. No data, no tells, no consent. Just the closed door, your calm voice, and those 16 words. "I do not consent to any search. Please leave my property unless you have a warrant." You don't need to be rude. You don't need to argue. You don't need to explain. You just need to remember that your front door is the last line between a casual conversation and a legal disaster. And once you open it, you may never be able to close it again. Now, tell me in the comments, has this happened to you? What did you say? What do you wish you had said differently? Because I read every single response, and the patterns I see from real people are what shape everything I write. Your story might be the one that saves someone else's home, their job, or their freedom.